Dowell. Start over. Good evening, everyone. I'm Pat Dowell. I'm the third ward alderman, and I wanted to have this community briefing to discuss a proposal from the Department of Transportation for Indiana Avenue between 31st to 35th Street. We initially sent out, or CDOT, I believe, did a flyer in our office, sent that out to Malcolm Weems, your new president of the Gap Community Organization. We asked him to get to send that to the membership of the Gap Community Organization. In addition, I believe CDOT did door-to-door flyers in the general area to also alert people who may not be deeply connected to CDOT. So I'm going to turn this over to, I think, Malahi Samadi to start us off, and then she will direct whomever is making the presentation. I would ask that you hold your questions to the end. If you could use your hand or raise your hand function, I will call you in the order that I see those hands raised. We'll try to take every question that people have. No question is a dumb question. So thank you very much for attending. And Malahi, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Alderman. My name is Mali Samadi. I'm Chief Traffic Engineer with CDOT and also Deputy Commissioner of Project Development, which part of it is Complete Street section that Dave and Brad, they're part of the section. I'm pretty familiar with this section of Indiana. Over the years, Alderman has basically relayed the complaints from residents regarding speeding on this stretch, and even south of here, and we will talk about that as part of our presentation. But there's been speeding over the years, complaint about the speeding, safety of pedestrians crossing at the intersections or crosswalks, at uncontrolled locations, and also bicyclists and also vehicular traffic. So when the issue of resurfacing came about, we thought that this is a good opportunity to reconfigure the street to make it basically using traffic calming measures to make it safer for all users of road. I have Dave Smith to start with the presentation, and Brad will help as well. Okay. Dave.
Thanks, Molly. And thanks, Alderman Dowell, for coordinating the meeting and for everybody tuning in for the presentation. Appreciate you guys taking the time. We're going to talk, as Alderman and Molly said, about Indiana Avenue, specifically between 35th and 31st Street. But happy to expand the conversation as needed south of 35th Street. What really started sparked this project is an upcoming street resurfacing, which we are working towards getting started this fall between 31st Street and 35th Street. And just to provide the context, Indiana is a one-way northbound street. It's a very wide street. And it currently has 3 travel lanes going in the northbound direction, with Michigan Avenue being the southbound couplet. And then there's parking on both sides of the street as well. As Molly has mentioned, you know, we've heard a lot and have gotten a lot of feedback over the years from folks within the community around concerns about speeding, people driving recklessly, difficulty as a pedestrian getting across the street, reduced visibility at intersections, really for everybody. And so because we have this street resurfacing project, we really want to take the time and implement a street configuration that keeps the neighborhood safe, gets people where they need to go, but really accommodates everybody, and really is rooted in what we call complete streets. Complete streets is an approach where everybody deserves and needs the ability to get around our city, regardless of your age, regardless of your ability, and regardless of your mode of transportation. We have a responsibility to keep everybody safe and make sure that our friends, family, and neighbors get home safely or get to their destination. And so we'll talk a little bit here about just observations and things that we've seen related to some of the driving behavior out on the street, and some of the ability for things like just getting across the street within marked crosswalks can be really challenging because of the width of the street and the speed at which people are driving. And part of our data collection process for evaluating proposals on this project was to actually go out onto the street and do a whole series of data collection and observations. And that included capturing the speed at which people are driving on Indiana. And what we saw was pretty astonishing, actually. As an example, between the hours of 7 and 8 a.m. when people are, getting ready, getting out to work, getting kids to school, we saw people driving very, very fast on Indiana, which probably isn't a surprise to many of the people tuning in today. 95% of drivers exceeding the speed limit, which is 30 miles per hour. We even recorded speeds of people driving as fast as you would be on the Dan Ryan. So over 50 miles per hour, up to 70 miles per hour. This is a real serious concern of the Department of Transportation's. And I know it's a concern within the community, because speeding is really the #1 determining factor of the severity of an injury that somebody sustains. And what you can see on this graphic is that as a pedestrian, as speeds increase, your likelihood of surviving being hit by a car goes down exponentially. And as an example, at 20 miles per hour, you have a 90% chance of surviving, whereas at 30 miles per hour, that goes down to 60% chance of surviving, 40% chance of being killed. And everything over 30 miles per hour just really starts to get into an exponential decrease in the likelihood of surviving being hit by a car. And these percentages are, quite honestly, a little bit outdated, given if we start looking at the design of vehicles that are on the street today. Cars are getting bigger and bigger, heavier and heavier. And so the outcome of getting hit by a car is becoming more and more dangerous. And that regulation or regulatory responsibility is at the federal level. And there's a lot of discussion going on within the U.S. Department of Transportation around design vehicles and improving the standards so that we are keeping people safe throughout the whole country. As part of our observations, we took a look at pedestrians just getting across the street and how that was working out for folks. And so we did a series of observations on Indiana at right by 32nd Street, which is a marked crosswalk. There's no traffic signal, no stop sign, but it's a marked crosswalk. And drivers are legally required to stop for pedestrians getting across the street. What we saw was over 80% of motorists not stopping for a pedestrian, just simply trying to walk across the street, which again, very, very concerning to us. The ability to walk along our streets, to get across our streets, is really a fundamental and basic principle for our transportation system. And so when we think about complete streets and making our streets safe for everybody, it really starts with the most vulnerable users, and that would be somebody who is walking. And what we've seen throughout Chicago by really taking a data-driven approach when we look at traffic crash data is that the wider the street, the more likely there is to be really serious crashes. And so on some of our wider streets at 50 feet or wider, you can see 17 times more crashes than a narrower street. Indiana today is 50 feet wide, and I'll get into more of those details. but it's 50 feet wide with 2 parking lanes and 3 travel lanes. So that is a long distance to cross, and it's really exacerbated by the fact that it's a one-way street. So you have 3 lanes of moving traffic. We also look at the number of, in addition to the speed, the number of people that are driving on the street. And we call that average daily traffic. And the average daily traffic on Indiana is under 5,000 cars per day, which is not a lot. And it really does not line up with having 3 travel lanes in one direction. That's not nearly, there isn't nearly enough demand for that space. And so the proposal we'll talk today is really about reorganizing the street, better allocating that space so that we are helping to slow down speeds so that we have people driving at safe speeds, but really focused on shortening pedestrian crossing distances. And you'll see that quite a bit in improving visibility for everybody getting around. We took a look at the crash data, and these stats that I'm talking about here are just for the segment from 35th to 31st. We can talk a little bit at the end about south of 35th, but these stats are specific for 35th to 31st. From looking at the traffic crash data over the last several years on this segment, it was very interesting that of the drivers who have caused injuries on traffic crashes on the street, 70% of them do not live in the surrounding zip codes. So I think that really lines up with Indiana and Michigan, both couplets, oftentimes serving as a way for people to get who live outside of the neighborhood to get where they're going quickly. And again, as we know, when you're driving fast, you're more likely to see somebody injured. So this project is really about slowing people down, safe street, providing more space for people of all modes of transportation, because what we're seeing is a lot of people from outside of the neighborhood really flying down Indiana and creating issues for the community. People walking and biking, so people outside of the vehicle, as I said, most vulnerable because you're not protected physically by a vehicle. Only people walking and biking only made up about 7% of the total traffic crashes within this area, but you can see they were overrepresented in accounting for 27% of the injury producing crashes. And this is something that, I wanted to show this just to really reinforce the vulnerability of somebody outside of a vehicle. Even though the number of crashes is a small percentage, it's a sizable percentage of the injury, those who are injured out on the street. And so this is the existing condition of Indiana. A couple of stats on here that I referenced, but really the heart of the challenges out here is the number of lanes. As I mentioned, it's just not there. There isn't the demand to require the 3 lanes, and so people have to cross 50 feet of street, which is a really long distance. And the goal of this, what we're presenting here, and we want to get feedback from everybody on this, is to really make the street safer and more inviting for everybody within the neighborhood. And a quick overview of the things that I'll touch on. One, removing one of the 3 travel lanes. So there'd still be 2 travel lanes, parking lane on each side. But again, narrowing the space so that we are encouraging people to drive at safer speeds, but also by repurposing one of the 3 travel lanes, we're able to shorten the distance that somebody is exposed to moving traffic. Installing what we call curb extensions or concrete curb extensions. These basically help to further improve the visibility of somebody crossing the street. They help to shorten the distance that somebody has to walk to get across the street. And then they also help to serve as a form of traffic calming at intersections so that turning motorists have to slow down to turn around the corners. Adding bus bulbs. These are basically large curb extensions that occur at bus stops. So the CTA bus only operates on Indiana north of 35th Street, not south. So where we have, there's about 4 bus stops or so between 35th and 31st, and I'll show an example of these. But where we have bus stops, we're expanding the curb space and creating a really nice space for people to get on and off the bus. It makes it a lot easier for the bus to deploy the ramp for anybody who needs it, and really helps to improve public transit operations. And then by taking that extra space, we're able to provide what we call protected bike lanes, where we create a space for people to ride a bike that's separated from motor vehicle traffic. And so first up, removing one of the 3 car lanes, as I said, it would be in the proposal, we would remove the easternmost travel lane and then retain the center lane and the travel lane to the west. By installing the concrete curb extensions, here's an example. This is called a curb extension or a refuge island. It's raised concrete. It's a 6-inch curb similar to a sidewalk. There's pedestrian warning signs, and it really does a good job of helping people to get across the street safely and comfortably. And where we're actually, I'll walk through every block of Indiana so you can see exactly what we're proposing. But in many crosswalks, particularly those that don't have a traffic signal, we're able to shorten the crossing distance by about 55%. So more than half of that exposure to moving traffic will be eliminated by just reorganizing the streets so that everybody has a little bit more space. And then, as I mentioned, these also function as traffic calming for people turning on and off of Indiana. This is an example of what we call a bus bulb or a boarding island. It's a raised concrete platform. Again, it's the height of the sidewalk, and it allows dedicated space for people getting on and off the bus. It allows for the CTA ramp to deploy easily. And it allows the bus to just pull up a lot easier to the bus stop, get somebody on and off, and then get moving on to the next location. So it's really beneficial from a customer experience. It's beneficial from a bus operation standpoint. And from a safety standpoint, it also doubles as a pedestrian curb extension. So you, again, are really shortening the distance that you have to cross. And then with the additional space, we're able to provide a protected bike lane. This is an example in Columbus Park on Jackson Boulevard in the Austin community. But we're able to put next to the curb, next to the east curb, there would be a space to ride a bike at street level. And then to the left of that bike lane, you would have parking, you would have your curb extensions and your raised bus platform. What we see generally is that, there's a lot of people biking all across the city. Chicago has seen the number of people riding a bike grow incredibly over the last 4 or 5 years. And what we see is when we include this type of infrastructure, it gives us the ability not only to provide a safe space for someone to ride a bike, which is nice because of how close we are to the lakefront trail and other amenities, but it also gives us the ability to, again, further shorten the crossing distance for the pedestrian. And all of these types of improvements really go hand in hand and are reciprocal for each other. So as we create a safer space for somebody to walk across the street, we're making the street safer to ride a bike, and we're also making the street safer to drive a car. When we take on these and implement these complete streets projects, we really see the number of traffic crashes go down for everybody, including people who are driving. So I'll walk through a series of slides here with these graphics that show what the proposal is for Indiana from 35th to 31st. So north is to the right side of the screen. So here's Indiana at the 35th Street intersection. First, we've got the improved bus stop or the bus bulb. It's this area here. This is raised to the sidewalk level. So as a pedestrian, you can stand in this refuge space, and now you have a much shorter distance to cross the street. If you are walking to the bus stop, you now have a dedicated space and platform that you can wait for the bus, and the bus can very easily pull up. It would pull up in this travel lane right here, get people on and off a lot quicker, and then move on to the next space. We've got parking essentially on the west side of the street would remain unchanged as it is today. There's very little pavement markings out on the street. There's just a couple of lane lines. So what we would do is stripe the parking lane so that it's very clear where you can park, where that parking lane ends. And what that does is it more clearly defines the travel lane space as well. Right now, because you don't have the parking lane striped, that travel lane looks very wide. With the 3 lanes in general, just visually as you're driving down the street, it looks like a very big street. And that is a very big contributor to high speeds. You start to get into this frame of mind that you're driving on the expressway when you have that much space. So this will really have more appropriate lane widths for for a city environment. So you got your parking lanes on the west side of the street, your 2 travel lanes, and then your parking lane on the east side. And then we would have to the right of the parking lane, you would have a space to ride a bike on. And between the parking lane and the bike lane, we would have some type of concrete curb to help separate and designate those spaces. And again, what we've seen in this configuration, we looked at a couple of different ways to look at the street, and this is really the way that we can reduce the crossing distance for a pedestrian the most and really improve visibility at all of the intersections. And Indiana is very consistent in terms of the width of the street, all the way from 63rd on the south up to 31st Street. And so the general layout stays the same. This is looking north of 34th Street. I'll also mention, as you guys know, at 35th Street, just north of 35th on the west side of the street, there's a senior facility. And so, we've got the College of Optometry by 33rd, public transit to the west, Divvy bicycle stations in the area, schools, parks, Dunbar Park at the north at 31st Street. And so we really have people of all ages, all abilities, walking along and crossing Indiana. So here on the east side of the street, same thing. We have this large concrete refuge space, curb extension, helps at the bus stops, allows people to stand in this space. And then on the southwest corner of 35th or 34th, we are also able to add in pedestrian curb extensions on the west side of the street. And so this right here, this crossing distance, the whole width of the street is 50 feet. You're now only having to cross essentially 22 feet of space, which is 2 travel lanes. And so that, represents a 56% reduction in the distance that you have to cross the street from curb to curb. So this is really a huge benefit just from a pedestrian standpoint. You've got the bike lane that continues on the east side of the street. These green markings here, this bike lane would be at street level, so you still have a curb in your sidewalk and parkway. But these green markings, we generally use these across driveways or alleys or intersections, or where a bike lane would cross a pedestrian crosswalk as well, which is what this is. And then you get to the 33rd Street intersection, where we are again able to implement the concrete curb extensions on both sides of the street, reducing the crossing distance, striping the parking lane line. This is at the College of Optometry on the west side of the street. There's a crosswalk and curb extensions and a pedestrian flashing beacon that was implemented in the last couple of years. CDOT and Alderman Dowell had partnered to get that in. And so that can all stay, and this design maintains that and sort of works with that in the existing space. And everything continues to the north to 32nd Street. This is where there's no traffic signal at this crossing. And we were seeing a lot of people, a lot of drivers, as I said, not stopping for pedestrians in the crosswalk. So by having the bus stop on the east side of the street, curb extension on the west side of the street, we're really able to tighten up the distance that you have to cross. The bike lane continues. You can see the green markings through the intersection just to provide awareness and visibility. And then your parking lanes on both sides of the street. And then that takes you up to Indiana and 31st Street, which will looks very similar to what it does today. Now, this project, as I mentioned, this would be part of it would also include street resurfacing. It would include upgrading any of the pedestrian ramps so that they're ADA compliant if they're not. Generally, if there's any curb or gutter that's in bad shape, that gets repaired as well. Bus pads would be installed. Those are the concrete roadway surface where the bus stops to help maintain the integrity of the street. So all of that would also be part of the project, along with new pedestrian crossing signage, and new crosswalks and all of the pavement markings. Now, south of 35th, we really look at this as setting the stage for the entire Indiana corridor, because we know that as you go further south, you get even higher speeds and even more crashes. And so we're working to figure out a game plan for continuing street resurfacing south of 35th Street. But so we'll have more information on that as it becomes available. But I think really taking advantage of the street resurfacing project that's planned now is really important to set the stage for making improvements along all of Indiana as a corridor, and really making the street safer for everyone. I know in various community engagements that we've had over the years, Indiana and Michigan have really come up quite a bit in terms of concern. Indiana is under the jurisdiction of the city, so we have the ability to do these types of improvements pretty quickly, whereas Michigan is under the jurisdiction of the state under IDOT, and so there's a little bit of a different process to go through there. And what we've seen, and I'll wrap up here in a second, what we've seen when we implement these types of complete streets projects is we see the number of traffic crashes go down. We see the number of people getting injured on the street go down. And that includes everybody across the board, whether you're driving, walking, going to public transit, riding a bike. With these projects, we see the street get safer for everybody. We see it be more comfortable and safer to walk along the corridor, to get across the street safely. With these projects, we know that by providing that dedicated space to ride a bike, it's more comfortable and safer. And with the bus boarding islands, we're able to make the transit experience better. But again, even if you're not using public transit, those concrete islands really function as curb extensions and refuge space, which all gets into further shortening the distance that a pedestrian has to cross the street. So like I said, we are working on the final schedule for the street resurfacing, but we're hopeful that we can get that started soon this fall. We've got this email address on the screen, completestreets@cityofchicago.org. If anybody has any questions that couldn't attend, or if you think of something afterwards, happy to hear that. And then we will post this presentation along with any other materials on the CDOT's website, which can be found at chicago.gov/complete streets. So with that, Alderman, is there anything else you'd like me to address, or would you, I can't see if there's any questions.
Yeah, I see a couple of questions. I'm gonna call on them in a minute. I just would like clarification on two things. One, the bike lane is east of the parking lane. And where does the concrete, is the concrete barrier between the parking lane and the bike lane, or is it between the curb and the end of the bike lane?
Yes, so correct. The bike lane would be on the east side of the street, next to the parkway or existing curb. And then
Mhm.
between the bike lane and the parking lane, there would be another concrete curb. And we're sort
Okay,
of,
so,
yeah,
so there is separation between the bikes and the cars.
yes, definitely.
Okay. The other question I have is, um, I think this would come up from the community, but, at 33rd Street, there is the, Pilgrim Baptist Church, rehab work that,
Right.
yes. Hold on a second, I just have to, rehab work, and they've got scaffolding up that extends into the street. How have you all assessed that, evaluated that?
I'll have to check on that, Alderman, with the resurfacing team. I know that has been work has been going on there for a while. I believe from what I'll have to check with the team for, and we can follow up with you. Do you know offhand if that scaffolding, does it extend into the roadway? I know it covers the sidewalk.
It extends, I believe, into the parking lane.
Okay. So
So you show a, that purple thing right here?
yes,
That's a bump out, right?
yes.
I don't see how you're gonna be able to do that with the way the things are at that corner. I need you to look at
Understand.
that.
Okay. Yeah,
Alright.
we'll look at that and
And the community may have other comments related to that. That's just my observation. And of course, I said I would go in the order that I saw people raise their hand. But as I was talking, some people were raising their hands, but I did see that Brett Gallagher was the first one to raise his hand. And we'll just go in the order that they're listed here. Brett?
Hi, it's actually, I'm a woman. I did have a question in the in the interest of the discussion here of the most vulnerable, people on the street. I did want to ask about the west side of Indiana. I know that you talked about the fact that you were almost going to be, marking where the parking would be on that west side of the street. One of the things that I had a question about was, is that extending kind of the area for parking on that side? And let me just preface this by saying that the reason I'm asking about this is because we have a lot of vulnerable people who reside on particularly the west side of the street, whether it's over the assisted living over at Rise towards 35th, or Ada S. McKinley, which is at the corner at 34th. We have a retirement community of Christian Brothers on that side of the street. And then there's a rehab place down right down the street on 34th. So my concern is that a lot of the time I see PACE buses at Ada S. McKinley and ambulances over at Rise. And I've seen a lot of difficulty with them trying to help some of my neighbors who might have some disabilities, mobility issues, things like that. And I've seen some of those near misses where they've almost been struck by vehicles going down Indiana. So I'm just trying to at least throw that issue out there. So if you're thinking about kind of protections, I think it would be important for the west side of the street to have, even if it's just like slightly longer demarcations for that parking, so that there is a little bit more room for those people to operate. And so that's just one thing I wanted to throw out there, because that's kind of been an issue, particularly on the west side. And
Thank you,
also,
Brett.
just were speed cameras ever considered? So those were the two things.
Thank you, Brett. David, you can answer the first question. I'll answer the second one.
Sure. Thanks, Brett. Yeah, so thank you for flagging that. By marking the parking lanes, I think that will, one, really help because there is no parking lane line. And we'll take a look. What we're doing right now is taking a look at all of the widths of all of the different individual elements and settling into those. But we will have, by having the parking lane marked, I think that will better align drivers along the street and will help provide more space for people getting in and out of the car. Additionally, just overall, the traffic calming, the curb extensions, having those in various places and at both sides of the street, I think is really going to have a helpful benefit, particularly for vulnerable users, as you mentioned, people with different ability levels getting across the street, but also getting in and out of those vehicles. Any parking, like on the west side of the street by Rise and some of the other locations you mentioned, any parking space, like designated parking spaces, those will be maintained. So I know at Rise there's a no parking area in front of their building. That will all, that will stay there. So I think that this will help some of those operations that you called out, but we'll also take a look at that and keep that in mind as we move forward.
Thank you, David. And Brett, I'm not a big supporter of speed cameras and did not support the ordinance or vote in favor of the ordinance when it was before the city council. But with that said, speed cameras are only utilized near parks and schools, and Indiana does not really fit that criteria, except for the Illinois College of Optometry, which has addressed their street crossing issue with those pedestrian crossing signs, which has worked for them. Next question comes from Joyce Combis.
Hello, my name is Michael Cannon. Joyce is my wife. We live on 33rd and Indiana. And one of the things I wanted to ask about was the cycling, the designated cycling lane. Would that lane be established as a one-way northbound lane or two-way? I'm asking because we oftentimes have cyclists go north or southbound on that, and especially we're dealing with motorized bicycles that can be a danger. So how do we intend to see the directionality of that lane, and how can we perhaps provide warning signs for bicyclists and of course motorized bicyclists to adhere to the one-way Indiana functionality?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Combis.
Thanks for the question. So, yes, good question. So the bike lane would be northbound only, same with the direction of traffic. And a couple of things. Part of the reason for that, we want people who are riding a bike to be able to see the traffic signals just like you are when you're driving. And so having something like a two-way bike lane creates a little bit of some challenges and has a unique fit, I guess, depending on the context of the street. And so that's one of the challenges of creating a two-way bike lane here, has to do with the traffic signals and visibility at the intersections and everything. In terms of the bike lane and encouraging people to ride in the bike the right way, on the screen here, you can see where it's green throughout the bike route. And this is, the number of bike symbols here will probably be increased, separate from this graphic rendering. So we'll have more of these bike symbols, and they also include an arrow which designates which way you're supposed to be riding a bike. So I think that will help. And then, 35th Street, 31st Street are bike routes. You've got Dunbar Park to the north, and then obviously the Lakefront Trail to the east.
Thank you. Danny Bishop? Danny, would you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. Thank you. Thank you, first of all, Alderman Dow, for moving on this issue here in the third ward, generally in the Indiana Street particularly. I have two quick questions here. I'm for the safer, inviting amenities. Beautification is what I'm talking about here, speaking of. Now, have we considered with the bus bump outs and so forth, bus shelter, anything on that as far as CTA bus shelters from anybody?
I can answer that.
Okay.
Every ward, Danny, is allocated, I believe, and Molly, correct me if I'm wrong, 72 bus shelters per ward. Our ward has 72 bus shelters in place. As you know, our ward extends from Roosevelt Road down to 55th Street, let's just say, along many north-south streets. I've reached my maximum. So the only thing I could commit to today is to look at the ridership. And I do this from time to time where there's low ridership and low usage of bus shelters. I have moved them to places where the ridership is higher. I don't know what the ridership is along Indiana at this point in this location, but I will look at that. And if it is possible to move a bus shelter or a bus shelter is warranted to be moved, I will move it.
Got you. Two quick things here, and I'll move along. Now, with this with this data that you collected, we've had plenty of problems with flooding on Indiana. I know that there was a mention of gutter replacements in that infrastructure here. How are we looking at the gutter replacement here for that particular section of streets from 35th to 31st? Gutter replacements. Residents have complained for many, many moons about snow, and some of the residents get out there themselves and, make it happen by sweeping or cleaning off. But flooding is a problem. Have you heard that?
Yeah. Danny, thanks for the question. So as part of this, I think one of the benefits with this being a street resurfacing is that they will regrade the streets so that it is pitched to the different catch basins and sewer structures, which will help. When they go through and survey this, they identify locations where the curb and gutter is, in bad shape, and then they replace that, which also helps.
Got you.
Are there any specific locations that are top of mind to you? Because I can make a note of those and then talk with the construction team and have those assessed.
Well, I know our neighbors there, and then we have them on here, Mr. O'Neill and Mr. Lloyd. Lloyd is there, and the neighbors have complained about a gutter there around 33, help me, Lloyd, 3340 or so South Indiana, in that area on the east side of the street, where they're forever trying to make sure that it doesn't flood, and it does flood over the curb walk there. Quite, if there's a heavy rain or snow, it's been a problem. So maybe we can make notations for that, David, and see what we dealing with here.
Yeah, the 3300 block.
I believe that's it. Yes, I don't have the exact spot, but it's 33, maybe on the east side, maybe 3345. Let's look in that area.
David, you could
okay.
also check the 311 system, and maybe
Yeah.
Lucy from my office can help you to see if there have been many complaints there. I have not received any complaints from
Well, we normally
Okay.
do it ourselves though, Alderman. That's why maybe we just get out there to neighbors and make it do what it do, as we say in the hood. We just get out there and kind of do it ourselves over the years.
Okay, well, we can't always do that. We can do that, Danny, and also make a record.
That's
Because
why.
that's what helps get the services we need.
Got you.
So we'll check the 311 system, and David Smith is gonna look at the area in greater detail.
I appreciate that. Lastly, and I'll be brief here, the Pilgrim Church, Alderman Dow, you mentioned that structure there on both sides, former Pilgrim Church on the east side, as well as the Annex Church or whatever on the west side of 33rd and Indiana. Now, those are both the egress to the Annex Church there on the west side. It protrudes to the curb, almost street level curb. And its very visibility is very poor there to see around. If you're headed eastbound on 33rd, to see around that church, traffic coming northbound is very difficult, if not impossible. And I've even witnessed, since in my tenure here, a fatal, very bad accidents at that corner of 33rd due to the Pilgrim Church. Don't know what can be done, but that is just another, suggestion here to look into that. Both sides of Pilgrim are just eyesores as well as unsafe, both. I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Danny. I think Malahi, was that you?
Yes. Okay, I see. 33rd. So it looks like we are putting bump out there, so drivers should be able to pull out further to the street, so they can, that bump out also, as Dave mentioned, helps with the visibility.
There's also a light there.
Right.
But I think the question is the visibility on the, what corner is that? Southeast corner.
Oh, I see.
Where the church scaffolding extends into the public way.
So southeast corner, as you can see, now that you have created that bump out there for the bus on the northeast corner and then extension of it to the southeast corner, what happens is the drivers on Indiana will be more visible actually to drivers on 33rd because they can see them. Dave, can you just put your, yes, as you can see, because of that, the drivers will be almost on the center of the street on Indiana. So people that are on 33rd, they can see them more.
Thank you. Michelle Singleton? Thank you, Danny.
Alderman.
Michelle Singleton?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, how you doing? Good evening.
Good evening.
I have a question, and I may request this. We talk about this project. There's no agreement or anything from residents, but how long is it going to take, and how is it going to impede on our residential space? Right now, we have the upcoming winter timeline. We have to move across the street back and forth as it is. How is it going? What is it going to look like, right? Construction wise, timeline wise, from 35th all the way to 31st. Will we have no parking? Will it be a lot of noise? Will we have a lot of areas we can go in? How does that look from your perspective, David?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Some of those details we're still working out in terms of schedule, but in general, and we will keep in touch with Alderman Dowell and team as those details come out. But in general, the street will, with these types of projects, the street will remain open to traffic. You'll be able to park. There may be some like spot parking restrictions that would be temporary if they're doing something like repairing a gutter or building one of the curb bump outs in that area. They may post a couple of temporary no parking signs. In general, you'll be able to park on the street throughout construction. I don't have a start date quite yet or an exact duration, but we will keep in touch with the ward office and we'll get that info out. We'll keep it posted on our website as we get it too. But in general, you'll be able to park. The street will remain open, and hopefully with, as minimal disruption as possible.
David, let me say this. I want to add on to what Ms. Singleton is asking. Now that she asked the question, I do have a concern. If this project, assuming, let's say we get the feedback we received tonight, we've taken, we can work those things out. I want to make sure that the work starts and finishes in this construction season. I don't want to go and, start something in the fall and then the plant shuts down. And then I have to come back and do it the rest in the spring. I don't want that. I want one complete project during the construction season of 2024. And if that can't be done, then I want this project to be held over to the spring.
Okay, understood, Alderman. Molly and I will circle up with the teams here and talk through that and make sure that we're all on the same page, and that this gets implemented in the way that is best for you
Right.
and the community.
In and out, in and out. Michelle, to answer your question about noise, the city of Chicago is not a party to the Chicago noise ordinance. So it doesn't apply. It'll be inconvenient. That's why I want it done all at once, so we can get the work done and get it over with, and we don't have to be subject to, doing this over 2 construction seasons.
And I appreciate that, Alderman. And just one more follow-up question. I know you did studies on speeding and pedestrians, but have you did any analysis, right? We have the nursing homes across, we have a lot of traffic of parking on the street, right? Have you did analysis that we're going to have any parking restriction where people are going to be able to park, especially when they swift shifts at that nursing home over there, when people have people visiting? I mean, have you did a count of how many cars are there, how often they're there, and what that traffic looks like as well, like analysis?
David?
Michelle, we haven't done like a formal parking study. We've done some observations and everything, while we're out there and looking at the corridor. But I'll also add too that when construction is active, we do have a construction manager who is on site, every day basically, and is responsible and does coordinate with institutions or stakeholders, neighbors along the corridor, so that once those activities do start, there can be some communication between the construction manager and those agencies to make sure that, there's no major disruption or complication in terms of, pick up and drop off activities like you were mentioning.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Singleton. James Turner.
Thanks, Alderman, for the meeting. I had a quick question in regards to the 34th in Indiana bus curbs or bus bulbs, I believe. It looks like the bus stop there is being extended, and there's quite the substantial bus bulb there. Is there any reason that stop is not kind of staying in that 34th intersection and we're extending it, what it looks like to be, 2 or 3 houses down, taking away that parking?
Yeah, James, thanks for the question. Yeah, so generally we try, we don't want the bus to stop and within the intersection basically. And so that is that's part of the thinking there, is to not have the bus stop within the intersection, and to have one of the crosswalks at least be cleared when the bus when the bus is stopped. Right now, within that intersection at 34th Street, if a bus stops, like it can be blocking both of the pedestrian crosswalks. And so the idea is to provide some space for the bus to stop where it's out of the intersection, but then also, freeing up the pedestrian space to get across the street.
We might need to look at that, David, because we can't afford to give up any parking spaces on Indiana, and it's not a real full intersection. You come down 34th Street, coming east, and you can't go any further. You have to make that turn going north. So I would ask that you look at that. We really cannot afford to give up any parking spaces. And by the way, if you could give us the numbers on parking spaces we have now and what we have after this, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, we'll take a look at this location.
Yeah, I want to support that point made by Mr. Turner. Patricia Banks. Judge Banks. Okay, looks like she disappeared. Alexander Doach.
Hi, yes, good evening. Thanks for letting me chime in here. Just Michelle brought this up. We have the weekly street cleaning between certain months, and I'm wondering if the reduction of lanes will impact that schedule whatsoever, considering the scope of the project, or there still will be the weekly Wednesday and Thursday street cleaning on the street once this project is completed.
Sure. Thanks, Alexander. Yeah, so that would remain unchanged. This would not impact that street sweeping schedule.
All right, thank you so much.
Judge Banks.
Okay, Alderman, good afternoon.
Hi.
Hi, I have a question because this bus stop that you, all of you are talking about is right in front of my home. And I have a problem with the fact that you're putting additional, you have a bicycle lane, or one or two bicycle lanes as I understand it. Plus that's going to increase the traffic in front of my home. And I did some research on this a number of years ago, and my understanding is bus stops are not normally placed in front of a residential home, but this one is. Why can't you move that bus stop down to that empty lot?
We're gonna look at that, this bus stop. I don't know about.
It's a big inconvenience because I have a handicapped person in my home.
Do you have a
park in front of the house?
Okay, so the bus stop is not in front of your home at this moment, right? There's no bus stop in front of your house. Okay.
It's in front of my home. And I have so much traffic here already, and now you or the city or the Department of Transportation is adding more traffic right in front of the home.
I think what I heard David Smith say is that he's gonna go back and reevaluate this particular bus stop. I am going to check on whether or not there is a law that says that you can't have a bus stop in front of a residential home. I doubt that exists, but I'm going to.
No, it does exist because I reviewed it a while back. It happened when this
I'm gonna look into that. And
it happened before this home was rehabbed. It was an empty house and no one was complaining.
Okay, so what is your address, Ms. Banks?
3361 South Indiana Avenue. That's right. It's like a T.
All right.
So people lean on my fence, and at one point they tried to put a bench right in front of my house. There is no tree line here, Alderman.
We will look into that. David, did you get that address? I see Brad shaking his head, so, okay, Judge Banks, we'll look into that. We won't solve that
All right,
tonight, but we
thank you.
have to look into that a little deeper.
I just wanted to bring it, I wanted to bring it to your attention, and it's been an irritant for years, but hopefully it'll be resolved. I see that Mr. Turner next door is complaining that the bus stop is being extended in front of his home.
Into it and get back to you as soon as we can. All right. I don't see any hands up. So David, could you conclude your takeaways from this meeting? This meeting will also be on the CDOT website, and we're gonna put it on my website. Okay, now I have a hand. Nicole Singleton. This is
Hello,
the
can-
last question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Ms. Singleton.
Great. I don't want to hijack this meeting, and I don't know if this is the appropriate meeting to address. I know the topic is about safety and about, the traffic that you're going to reassess on Indiana. But is there a conversation where we can talk about like the public safety in this area? And the
This
amount
is
of,
not the meeting for that.
okay,
The meeting usually happens at the CAPS meeting, or this
Okay.
can be a topic on the Gap Community Organization agenda.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Joyce Combus, do you have another question? I see your hand just went up as well.
Yes, thank you. My name is Michael Cannon. My wife is Joyce Combest. She's freshly married. We've been married for a couple of years now. But the question was, I know during the baseball season, some people, White Sox fans, come as far west as Indiana to park, for free. And we're talking about parking issues. Is it possible for us to have signs that would alert others who aren't from the neighborhood that these parking spaces are not for them to use? That's my question.
No, the only way that can be done is if an area has residential permit parking, and I don't think that your area would qualify for that. If you want to follow up on that conversation, I can have Allison in my office contact you. If you send me an email at ward03@cityofchicago.org, and then we can go over, she can go over with you what the criteria is for residential permit parking. Otherwise, the streets are public streets.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, David, would you close this out?
Sure. Thank you, Alderman Dowell, and your team for hosting the meeting, and for all of you for tuning in and providing feedback on this project. We've got a couple of follow-ups on our end. We talked about the bus stop, specifically at 34th Street. We talked about some flooding concerns or issues around the 3300 block as well, 3360s. So we'll take a look at those issues. I think people chimed in about, confirming that, a lot of different people using the street with senior facilities along the corridor. We will be looking into and coordinating with Alderman Dowell on next steps, as well as a sense of timeline and construction timeline. Alderman expressed wanting to see the project, not provided disruption over the winter time. And so we'll be working with Alderman Dowell and the construction folks at CDOT to map out the next steps in terms of construction. But we've got a couple of things that we'll look at and follow up. We will provide this presentation on the website, which is listed on the bottom of the screen, chicago.gov/complete streets. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to email myself at completestreets@cityofchicago.org. But we'll keep in touch and coordinate in terms of next steps with Alderman Dahl.
All right, and I want to thank Brad and Ms. Samadi and David and Lucy Macedo, who are from my office, who is not feeling well today, but I see she hung in there with us. And Brian Friedman, who took over to do this meeting. I appreciate you all. I appreciate the community for showing up. And we will get back to you on the final recommendations for this project as soon as we can. Thank you very much for attending. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.